Welcome, everybody. I'm Kate with the Creative Coast. I'm filling in for Jen Bonet today, who usually runs these lunchtime topics. And we're excited to have Nate Lynch. He's going to be talking about remote workshop facilitation, which is a really exciting subject. He led a lunchtime topic back before the pandemic started, and it was a really good one. So he knows what he's doing, and you can already see his screen looks cool. And he's going to be talking about how to spice things up in your workshops and make them more fun, engaging, and exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you, Nate. Let me make you a co-host, and you can get started.
All right, thanks, Kate. All right, so I should be broadcasting now, so you should see me and this little flickering guy here next to a presentation. So we're going to talk about remote workshop facilitation. So thanks everybody for joining in. I see some people I've not seen in a very long time, so I see some friends from college who hopped on here. So anyway, and some old coworkers. So hey everybody, I can't wait to interact with you all as we walk through this. So here we go. So remote workshop facilitation. This is our lunchtime topic for today. We called it remote. I like the word virtual. It's a little bit more inclusive that everybody's kind of remote right now. At some point, I like the word virtual just because it kind of implies that everybody's kind of using the same tool set all the time. So we're going to change the topic name on the fly to virtual workshop facilitation. So, all right. So next up, a little bit of an intro. So my name is Nate Lynch. I improve business one design at a time. So I've been a design consultant for a long time. I most recently worked for Gulfstream Aerospace here in Savannah, which is where the Creative Coast is based, for those of you who are dialing in local. And for those of you who aren't, that's a little bit about the Creative Coast. We're all here on the coast of Georgia near Savannah and Tiger. So I'm a design consultant. I'm a communication facilitator in those workshops that we'll be discussing. I eliminate ambiguity. I love eliminating ambiguity. I love crafting collaboration and bringing people together to have really meaningful conversations. I hate meetings. I oppose them vehemently, but I love workshops. So as much as I try to keep my schedule clear from meetings, I love putting workshops together and having people work together collaboratively. So a little bit about the focus of what we're going to be talking about is the intersection of virtual, workshop, and collaboration. So I'm not going to spend too much time focused on just collaboration or too much time just on virtual stuff or too much time just on workshops. So hopefully some of you have some background in any one of those particular things, but perhaps the intersection of all three of these is unique. And that's where I want to have this discussion today. So I'm going to be talking a lot, as you might be expecting, but I definitely want there to be a lot of participation and definitely Q&A in the end. As Kate mentioned, there's a chat. But from a virtual standpoint, part of what is really interesting is that virtual is here to stay. I think a lot of the virtual or remote or technologies and working has all come about because of the pandemic and COVID and all that, but it's not going to go away. It's really just sped things up 10 years for a lot of companies who may have been reluctant to kind of move forward with this. So here's some kind of stats. You can kind of comb the internet and find this sort of thing, but businesses save about $11,000 per year per virtual worker. Employees save $2,000 to $7,000 themselves. From a carbon emission standpoint, if that's something you all are focused on, 3.6 million tons of carbon emissions are reduced thanks to virtual work and all the travel that's cut down. 300 million users use Zoom each day, which is pretty staggering. I think it was 200 million in March. So they're up 50% since that time. And I think at the end of last year, they hadn't even cracked 100 million. So obviously their business is booming. I would assume that similar numbers are being seen for all the other virtual meeting technologies. So 77% of virtual employees say they're more productive when working from home. And I think that's been sussed out a lot. I know we focused a lot on that at Gulfstream, trying to understand, is there any productivity loss? Are we gaining something? What's the net on this? And I think obviously it's kind of hard to suss all that out because these are kind of unprecedented times and it's not just virtual work. It's kind of a whole new way of working. Entire families are at home, for example. It's not really true virtual work. And also 99% of workers say they prefer working virtually at least some of the time for the rest of their career. So I know there's a lot of workplaces who are considering a mixed approach, which I think has a lot of benefit. A few days in an office, a few days working virtually, or even just kind of staggering those week to week or month to month. There's a lot of benefits, but virtual is here to stay, which means virtual workshops are here to stay, at least as a portion of your tool set in terms of how you collaborate with other people. So, all right. And just one more thing I want to focus on again with chatting during this session. Please use the chat. So I'm going to type in there, hello. So hopefully that pops up a little notification. If you've never used the chat in Zoom, there's a little icon in the bottom center. If you can't see it, you maybe just need to make your window a little bit bigger. But please share your thoughts and questions as we go, because like I said, I want this to be a two-way street. So I don't have any prizes to give out, but if someone just say hello to me so I'm not talking to a void, perhaps you all dropped off the call. Okay, but to kind of get us started, I have a question for everybody. So I would like to know, have any of you facilitated a virtual workshop before? If so, let's type your answer in the box. Maybe it's yes, more than 2 times, yes, just 1 or 2 times, C, no, but I participated in at least 1 workshop, or no, I've never attended a virtual workshop. And I don't just mean a meeting. I think we've probably all, including this one, been in a virtual meeting of some kind, but from a workshop and collaborative, kind of generative or evaluative workshop of some kind, I'd love to understand kind of where everyone's experience is. So thank you all for answering in there. We got some answers pouring in. We've got, let's see, we got 3 A's and 3 B's. Good, all right. So it seems like it's familiar to some folks that you've been participating in some things. So that's great. So hopefully you have some insights to share, and that's where I'd love to hear from you as we go through this. If you've experienced some of the things that I'm going to talk about with you all, or if you've learned something that I haven't talked about, I want to learn just as much as I want to talk about this stuff. So hopefully we can share some anecdotes and some learnings that you all have come across as well. So, all right. So let's see here. We will come back to the topic at hand. So that was kind of the intro to set up where we were going. And so we're going to get right into the meat of our topic today. Okay. Gotta fix my size. All right, there we go. Okay. So virtual workshops. So there's some pros and there's some cons. So let's talk about what's not great about them, right? So there's a reduced communication scope. So when you work in person with people, you have body language, you have intonation, there's how people are sitting in their chair. You lose a lot of that because of poor audio quality. You only see me from like the shoulders up, for example, so you don't know what I'm doing with my hands or my feet or my legs, or if I'm pacing around the room if I have my camera turned off. You know, as most of you have your cameras turned off, I can't see what you're doing, whether you're enjoying this, whether you're eating a sandwich. Perhaps you've all left to go play outside while I'm going to talk into the void. So a lot of that stuff is just a one-way street. And I think as a facilitator, you all have to understand you have to be engaging. You have to keep people coming back and give them a reason to interact. There's also just less attention. So oftentimes when I'm running workshops in person, you know, you want everybody to kind of shut their laptops and put them away. I try to actively avoid technology as much as possible when we're running a workshop in person. But inherently, one of the challenges of a workshop virtually is you kind of need a laptop or an iPad or some sort of screen, which then is a portal to the entirety of the internet. So it's hard to shut that off. And, you know, we mindlessly do that. If you all get bored, you find yourself checking Facebook or whatever it is. And that's normal, right? But that's, again, what you kind of have to overcome, keeping people engaged and talking to each other as collaborators in a workshop, and also with the facilitator if you're running it. So also just less active participation. It's super easy to sit back and just passively look at a screen. It's less easy to do that in person, right? So I can walk around, tap somebody on the shoulder, say, hey, how's it going? Or hey, what are you feeling? Or what, you know, perhaps, you know, why aren't you contributing? Is there anything we can do to help make you more comfortable? It's harder to do that virtually. I could ping people individually via chat, but that's just a lot of different windows to kind of to make sense of. So, but the pros, there's a ton of pros, and this isn't even a comprehensive list, but they're more cost effective and easier to schedule. So I don't know about if you all have this experience, but any workshop I've had that is over a couple of people, it's really hard to get everybody in the same room at the same time for any period of time. And oftentimes then, if you are able to fly people in from around the country or around the different offices, and you get them all in one place, you want to make the most of it. So then it's 8-hour workshops for 3 days straight. Everybody's toast. They just get exhausted and they don't have a lot of fun unless you really have a lot of breaks. You know, the benefits of virtual workshops are that you could have 3 2-hour workshops in a week spread out over 3 or 4 days or however many you need. And that gives everybody some relief. It's easier to kind of get everyone's time, especially if there's some stakeholders that are kind of hard to get their time. Virtual workshops have come in really handy for me in the past. Also just increased flexibility. There's a lot of things you can do that you can't do in person, right? So it may be, again, hard from a real estate perspective of I need 7 meeting rooms for for workshops and breakout sessions. Or I have one big meeting room that everybody breaks into individual little pods, but they're all talking over each other. It's really hard to focus. You can, one of the features of Zoom, I know, and I'm sure you can do this with other ones as well, is you can break people up into these pods ahead of time. And when you hit a button, it casts them out into these various smaller meeting rooms for individual collaboration sessions, which is a handful of people per workshop. And you can kind of bring them all back virtually with the click of a button as well. And so that's that flexibility of kind of breakouts that actually allow for that more kind of individual work that maybe is a little bit harder to do, again, if you're sitting right next to somebody in a room and you're not in their group. And also just new ways of working. So I'm a proponent of any new way to collaborate in terms of experimenting with it. So for example, I've only used this crazy virtual presence thing that I'm using right now a handful of times as I've been testing it out. And so this is a bit of an experiment with you all today. So I'd love to hear how this comes across, if it's completely wacky or distracting, if I look like some sort of crazy hologram from the 80s or what we thought the future would look like at that time. But we'll talk a little bit about this wacky tool that I'm using and a few other things as well. So does anybody have any pros or cons they've found? Feel free to toss that in the chat. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll kind of talk about it on a high level and kind of address any questions you may have as we go. So Albert wrote it a couple minutes ago. He's in pajama bottoms and a dress shirt on Zoom, right? So I think that's pretty standard. It's the business up top look. This is not even a real shirt. It's all just layered. No, this is all completely real. But that technology is there, right? So you can be a lot more comfortable. I read a friend of mine the other day said that he bought his like 3 more pairs of these soft pants. He hasn't worn any formal casual work attire for months and is loving it, right? So, all right. Yeah, exactly. Soft pants and hard pants, right? So it's like, when's the last time you put on a pair of dress pants, anybody? So thank you, Andrea, you're digging hologram mate. So, we will play with that tool even more in the future. So, all right. So there's some pros and cons. So what we are going to talk about, here's some various topics from a tool standpoint that you might need to have in your quiver as you're deploying these workshops or trying to facilitate them effectively. So some sort of real-time communication, some sort of asynchronous communication, some way to document stuff as you go, some sort of digital whiteboarding, sticky note, and all sorts of other functionality, but there's some tools for that, which are, again, that's on the newer end of the spectrum. And also just embracing the newest of the new, and we'll kind of get into that as well. All right, so real-time communication, this should not be surprising to anybody. I think you're all on Zoom right now. Perhaps where you all work, you don't use Zoom, you use Google Hangouts or WebEx or GoToMeeting. I've used all of these at some point in my career. I'm sure they're all feeling a resurgence. I know that Gmail in particular is always piping in there with notifications that, hey, would you like to add a Google Meet to this email thread? Or, you have a meeting coming up. Would you like to use Google Meet? So they're really pushing it hard. And I think that obviously you all are on here. One of the benefits, so you're familiar with it. One of the benefits of this also, as Kate mentioned, is we can record this and people can watch it later. So one of the drawbacks of workshops is that there's a lot of amazing energy that happens while you're in them, but the people who can't attend or they weren't invited or they weren't a part of it don't get to share in any of that. And it's kind of hard to set up a video camera in an office environment and kind of record that and get everything that's going on. But you can easily, with the click of a button, record these sorts of sessions and get a lot of benefit out of it later. And I don't know anybody who just want to watch 2 hours of a workshop later, but you can definitely say, hey, there's this point where everybody's kind of ripping on everybody's ideas, and this is the real benefit of a workshop. And you could go and say, hey, here's a 3 or 5 minute clip, and send that to them and kind of get them on board with the energy that you can kind of create with these workshop scenarios. So, all right, so that's real-time communication, which I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with. All right, so asynchronous, right? So this is not all at the same time, basically. And so, you might want to take some notes. You can collaborate. You probably use Slack or Teams or both, or a third thing that I'm not mentioning. Again, this isn't comprehensive. It's just saying these are the kind of tools to help you do this sort of stuff. It's also good for record keeping after the fact. Brian, thanks for your comment there. Being forced to use Teams for work in school, and it sucks compared to these other tools. Exactly, right? So, and part of the challenge with Teams, often when it's deployed via an enterprise, they put all sorts of restrictions on it. So a lot of people will Google, hey, what can Slack do, or what can Teams do, or what can some other tool off the shelf do? But their workplace may have, for security reasons, and rightly so, kind of withdrawn some of the capabilities there. So even though they're Googling, hey, I should be able to do this cool thing, maybe they can't do it. And that can be something that you have to overcome as well. The frustrations of the participants and the tools that you have to use, right? And so some of these newer players are super lightweight, super easy to use, like Zoom and Slack, whereas, kind of the older diehard companies, they maybe have more feature bloat and it's a little bit more difficult to use. But that's all something to understand as you're facilitating that's the frustrations that the folks on your calls and workshops are going to have. So, all right. So everybody's favorite Office 365 and Google Docs. Again, I kind of assume based on your answer earlier about being a part of virtual workshops that you're probably familiar with Google Docs and 365. Presentations like PowerPoint, Word documents, or other word processing stuff, Google Sheets and things like that. These are really great if you have assets to show in workshop, because it can be a shared document everybody could look at and then look at it outside of the presentation that I'm sharing. So I can say, hey, here's a link to the Office 365, everybody can look at it. It's also great if you want to break out into those smaller groups, or even if it's a larger group, like 15 people, you could have everybody in the same PowerPoint deck, for example, creating content. Oftentimes when I'm running workshops, I'll split people into groups and they'll each generate things and then share them back to the group. That's a great time, especially virtually, to say spin up a virtual Google presentation or a PowerPoint document from Office 365. Everybody hops in there and can edit the slides, and they don't have to bottleneck on one particular team member, which I know anyone who's been working for a while has had that experience of everybody has lots of ideas, but there's a single funnel that it all works down to the person architecting the presentation. And so getting everybody in there at the same time is really beneficial, especially in workshops where the time is really vital, and everybody can contribute at the same time and not have that bottleneck and feel like they're sitting around waiting for someone to input the stuff that you told them about. So, all right. All right. And then, something else, I just saw a comment from Albert. Thanks, Albert. One of the pros of virtual workshops is accessible anywhere, so you're not tied to a desk or an office space. So, perhaps you all are at a park somewhere. I'm in my office at home right now, but I could be doing this from anywhere with an internet connection, which is pretty impressive. And as soon as 5G gets rolled out, that'll be a lot more places with a lot more bandwidth than we've ever gotten to experience before. So, all right. So let's see. I'm gonna disappear and get out of the way while we talk about Miro and Miro. If you've ever heard of Realtime Board, it got rebranded Miro. I think it was the end of last year, in 2019, and now it's called Miro. So now it's a little bit confusing because Miro and Miro sound very similar, but they are very similar. So maybe one will buy the other at some point. But they're both really, really interesting tools for digital whiteboarding and sticky notes. There's a whole, I think Miro's is called Miroverse. There's a whole slew of templates to pick from. So if you want to do whiteboarding or a journey map or some sort of 2x2 matrix, there's all sorts of different things as starting points. But they have a really low barrier of entry from a UI standpoint, which is really awesome. So this is a screenshot of Miro. And you can see down the left side, there's a really simple palette of tools. And then there's all sorts of different content. So I don't think that they generated a lot of the content on the right. It looks kind of like a high-res mock-up of a website or something. That's kind of pasted in, I think, from something else. So you can share images that you find on the internet. The stuff down at the bottom looks kind of like post-it notes, or what's the term? Postcard, little post notes. Those are all generated in Miro, and they're really easy to copy and paste and change the text of, right? So you can change the color and organize in groups and columns. So that's the digital replica of what would be a sticky note session on a whiteboard or in person. And that's kind of where these things excel. You can kind of see there's a couple little cursors. You'll see one, the green one says Emily, and a purple one that says Matthew. So everybody who's in the file at the same time has a little cursor with their name on it that pops up. And you can have, I think, like an unlimited number, certainly enough for everybody in your workshop to be in here at the same time and generating content and stuff to talk about. So the stuff along the top is probably generated in Miro, right? It's like a little flow of this to this, a decision, and it comes down here and then points to a little high-res mock-up on a phone. There's some charts and graphs, probably from a spreadsheet of some kind. There's a little video. It was, I think, a promo for Miro. But you can kind of see all this content in there for reference that everybody can look at and zoom in and out of at the same time. And it's really, really fantastic. And like I said, it's really easy to sign up. Yeah, exactly. So Brian Anderson, thanks. We just signed up for an enterprise license from Miro. It has been a game changer. Exactly. It's fantastic. It's even great if you're not virtual. So, you know, there's a whole slew of tools that have been created that are going to be great even if we're able to return back to offices as close to normal as before. This would still be super beneficial because, you know, one of the drawbacks of Post-it notes is, well, now I got to take a photo of them and take them down, and then I just, you know, all this paper that I just wasted for, you know, a couple hours worth of work, and I got to now transcribe them all digitally. This stuff is already digital. You can easily share it out. It's editable, you know, moving forward. You can drag all this stuff around. You can copy and paste all the sticky notes and rearrange them in 3 different ways if you're trying to figure out different sorts of categorization, for example. If you're kind of doing an affinity exercise of some kind. And that's, you know, really, really great moving forward. So, you know, I love Post-its. I still have tons of them. I'm still going to use a Sharpie and hang it up on the wall. But this is something else, again, in your toolbox to consider. If you're not already using this, definitely play with it on your own and pitch it to any company that you may be working for or working with if you don't have control of kind of acquiring this stuff yourself. So, okay. So, all right. So the last tool I'm going to talk about is relatively new. I think it's maybe a month old at this point. And that's this crazy virtual presence thing. Ooh, hello. That is called mm-hmm. And they were joking that it's something you can say with your mouth full on a call. And so this is just a screenshot from one of the founders kind of giving a demo about it. But basically, it's allowing me to do some of these things. So I'm just going to click around and do a couple of these. So I can do this and have it not be full screen. Let's see, I can zoom myself up or down, so I can be really big or really small. I can change myself to any color overlay. So here I am without any sort of modification. It's just my camera. Here's a blue that I picked, but I could be purple or red if I'm really angry, perhaps. Green light, everybody come back and pay attention. So, you know, I don't even know what you might use some of these things for, but that's part of the fun of this, right, is kind of exploring. You can also have yourself anchored at different points. So here I'm in that corner, now I'm over there, now I'm with a disembodied head, which is kind of why I like being in the bottom. Down here, you can hide yourself or make yourself, you know, translucent. Instead of, right now, my computer's kind of struggling with the green screen. They actually recommend if you want to have this kind of on the fly cutting yourself out to get a backdrop, a green backdrop, which would be pretty fun. You can also turn yourself into a circle. So, and then you can drag yourself around with the mouse. So I could use myself to point to things. So I'm like, here, read this word. Or, hey, I'm going to give this presentation instead. And I'm going to block out Phil who's giving that presentation. So one of the newest features, which I have not played with, is called Copilot. And it allows you virtually to present in Teams. So, for example, Albert's asking Zoom only. No, it's what it is. It's an overlay for your camera. So basically, like when you go to Zoom and you pick which camera you want to use, one of the settings will be So basically, it's a third-party application. It can be used with anything that uses your camera, which is pretty amazing. And I think that, again, they're constantly iterating on it. I think they just came out with a new version the other day, and I think they're letting a lot of people in now. I got a request in early, and as I was talking to somebody, I actually have a friend of mine who happens to work there. So I think I probably jumped to the top of the line faster than most. But the point is, I know they've been letting thousands and thousands of more people in. So even if there is a wait list, I don't think it's that long of a wait anymore. And then let's see here. I can just turn that off and just be this. But you can host your own talk shows if you want, which is, they were joking, it's like a Saturday Night Live weekend update. And then there's also lots of backgrounds. I'm not going to get into all that because that's pretty standard fare. But just the fact that you can see, I got to use the pointer the right way. You can see me and you can see the content at the same time is pretty cool. And you don't have to kind of pick one or the other. The other thing it does is, you see a full screen for me, but I'm able to see all of my desktop, which was one of my complaints about like presenting. If you share PowerPoint and you don't make it full screen, then it's sharing part of your screen and the thing's real small. And so that's the other thing that's super cool about this is I can still have the chat open. I can look at what you guys are talking about as we're going through this, and I can still be present. And I can move myself around. So, all right. So embrace the new. So I hadn't used this at all a month ago. This is probably about the fifth time I've used it in an actual meeting or discussion of some kind. And so I'm still kind of getting used to the tools myself. So we're going to move on to some structure for your workshop. So this is really, really, really important. So the tools are just one component, right? And that's kind of table stakes that you want to have the right tools in place. But what I want to touch on is just how important goals are for workshops. And this kind of treads back into the category of this is really applies to any workshop that you run, but have a goal, please. It's like worse. A workshop without a goal is worse than a meeting without an agenda. I'm sure we've been to plenty of meetings without agendas. But workshop without goals are even worse because they're usually longer and they're more focused. And if it kind of goes off the rails, you got to keep everybody in check. So I'm going to disappear here again. Those sound effects are done by me, by the way. That's not part of But hopefully they'll add some because I think that'd be pretty fun too. All right. So workshop goal, you want to pick one, right? And maintain focus throughout, which is, again, really tough. Anyone who's ever facilitated a workshop knows that there's always some folks in there who kind of want to talk about what they want to talk about and kind of have to redirect them and help, make them feel heard, but also get everybody back on track at the topic at hand so you can make some progress. So the three most popular kind of workshops I tend to run have to do with alignment, creation, or some of refinement and decision. So alignment's all about informing people. So maybe it's getting a bunch of folks from different parts of a business or everybody on the same team in the same room at the same time, which maybe doesn't happen very often. And you want to inform people about something, right? It might be something that's already happened or something that's going to happen in the future. But maybe you want to document a process and you need these different players in there at the same time in order to really make some headway. Or maybe you know what the process is, but they think they know, and you really want to get everybody in the room who kind of disagrees to say, hey, there's a giant disagreement here. Let's at least get all the thoughts on the table, right? So we can identify areas of confusion, disagreement, or friction, and kind of work through those and at least come to a consensus about, okay, this is what's actually happening, not just what we think is happening. So that's the alignment. Another kind of tack to take in a workshop is creation. That's expanding ideas, maybe creating something new or improving something old that we want to make better. And that's one of the more fun ones, I think, out of the three. And that's oftentimes what people think of when they think of workshops is making new things. And the third is refinement and decision, which is narrowing your focus. And again, this is where you want to kind of present arguments of opposing viewpoints or similar viewpoints that you're trying to pick, maybe debate some pros and cons and make a decision and move forward. And again, because of the pros of virtual workshops, I would always recommend you do these sorts of activities separately and not try to run an all-day workshop that hits all three of these. Even if you were in person, don't do that. people just have a hard time kind of switching their mind and context around, okay, wait, are we making decisions? Are we expanding and contracting? Like, what are we trying to do right now? And so it's really best to break these up. And like I said, one of the pros of virtual is that you can break it up. And so I would recommend maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or something like that, a 2-hour workshop for each of these, if that's what was needed. Maybe you only need an hour. It kind of depends on how much you want to get through. But that's one of the benefits, is break these up, pick a focus, maintain focus. It'll be easier to bring people back to, not say, oh, are we refining yet? No, this meeting is all about creation. If it's not about creation, let's table it for another time. We will get to that at some point. So that's super important to keep in mind, to maintain that focus and maintain that structure. Okay, so, and then the second half of this is something that I've used for a while, which I don't know if there's a real term for this, but I call it agenda modules. But again, this is if you were going to run either a 60-minute workshop or a 120-minute workshop virtually, you might spend 10 minutes on the intro, and that's kind of like the setup for what's going to be happening. And then the meat of the presentation or the workshop is kind of down there for an energizer exercise, a workshop exercise, and then a recap. So it's about 10 minutes, 25 minutes, and 10. And then you have a next steps kind of wrap up for 5 minutes at the end. And that gets you through 60 minutes. It goes pretty fast. But you can look at this as saying, okay, how do you expand this out? And at 120 minutes, it's very similar, where you're repeating two of these kind of generative, really intense activities of energizer, workshop, and recap with a break in between. So the reason that doesn't have a box around it is because I want everybody to just put the meeting on pause. You don't have to close it, but you just put it on pause and say, everybody come back in 10 minutes, go for a walk, take a lap around your apartment, go get a cup of coffee, like just, disengage. And that's one of the major differences of the whole virtual versus in-person. I'm sure we've all experienced some fatigue doing all this virtual stuff. That has never felt more strongly than in a workshop where you're actively trying to listen and participate and create with a bunch of people through a screen. So you really need to have more breaks than normal between each of the workshops you have, and also more breaks during the workshops you have. So I would recommend you not have a virtual workshop over 2 hours. I'm sure there's lots of people who run longer than that. I would rather have multiple workshops over multiple days than a longer workshop any specific day, especially if it's virtual. And like I said, the barrier of having that over multiple days is probably eliminated when you don't have to reserve rooms, you don't have to travel across country and stay in hotels. It may actually prove to be easier to get some of those hard to get stakeholders if you just have a workshop that's a couple hours long at most. I know we've had lots of workshops in the past where someone says, oh, I'm a VP of this or that. I can only come for an hour of the workshop. Which hour do you want me to come to? I'm sure most of us have experienced that sort of thing. So this plays right into that and say, well, the workshop's only an hour long. Perfect. And then maybe you can get them for an hour another couple days later. So that's one of the really strong benefits. But this becomes really modular. And I'm not going to go into detail about how to run any of these things. Again, that's kind of more on the, if you haven't facilitated a workshop before, that's something you'll probably want to look into. But an intro is just kind of a setup. An energizer is like an icebreaker or some sort of activity to get people used to being engaged. We had our little quiz at the very beginning of this, A, B, C, or D. You could do something a little bit more intensive with people sharing pictures of their workspaces or some topical thing related to the workshop you're talking about. And then the meat of it is that 25 minutes of, is it collaboration or generative stuff? You can go off and do things independently and bring everybody back. And then a recap, some way to share all that information and distribute it again around the entire workshop so people kind of understand what's going on. And then the next steps, like, hey, what happens after this meeting? Where are we going? So you can kind of see it, like I said, it's kind of modular and applies to the double length. But basically, if you just keep it to 60 or 120 minutes, people are going to feel much more refreshed, and they're not going to resent coming to these workshops because it should be fun and it should be engaging. And as a presenter or a facilitator, it's really, really hard to stare into the void and talk as I've been doing. And again, I know, thank you all for paying attention and being on here, but it's tough as a facilitator because you're not actively creating a lot of this stuff. You're just trying to get other people on board and engaged to create these things. And you have to understand they're humans, they need a break. So, okay. All right, so to recap, communication is key, right? Super, super important. And it's so important that I repeated it at the beginning and the end of this intentionally. Also use the tools, right? So use all those new wacky tools, use the tools that are tried and true, embrace the new, like this thing, which I'm still kind of getting used to. And that's okay as well, right? I think part of using the new tools is understanding you might stub your toe a few times, but that makes everybody a little bit more endearing perhaps to the folks running the workshop, that they're all just human beings trying to get through all this fun stuff. Maintain structure, super important, because not everybody's in the same room. So it's very important to start and stop things very concisely. So if you're running a workshop and you have the intros done, say, okay, we're done with the intro. Now we're moving on to this. Or if you say, hey, we all have 20 minutes to work together. Give people, a 10-minute warning, give them a 5-minute warning. Be very concise about, okay, now we all need to come back. It's much more directive. And that again, maintaining structure is half of it. And the other half is then communicating that to everybody else. Decreasing the length of your workshops, but increasing the frequency. I can't stress that enough. I obviously just spent a few minutes talking about it. Also decrease the length of the time during the workshops and increase the frequency of breaks and some switching so that people don't get too burnt out focusing. And again, communication is key. I'm going to say that a few dozen more times. Hopefully something more advanced than an old, I guess that's not a rotary phone. But not many of us have those in our homes anymore, but I do kind of love those throwback phones. All right, so I think that brings us to the end. So let's discuss. We have thoughts, feedback, questions, anything that you all want to know that we didn't touch on, anything that you want to share that you haven't had a chance to yet, any experiences maybe that you've had with virtual workshops that you'd love to share with us that we can learn from. I'd love to hear. Oh, breakouts for Zoom, is it Procounts only? That's a good question. I think it might be. I would have to Google that to understand. But yeah, basically what you can do it on the fly. It just takes more time, which is why I'd recommend you assign people beforehand. But basically, if you're running a workshop and you know the participants, you can basically import that as a spreadsheet or a CSV into Zoom and then kind of divvy them up into different breakout rooms. And then by default, they all come in together, and then you can hit a button and it kind of assigns them. And I think I can't remember how it works exactly, but basically then they're all distributed out and they've joined that room, then you can set a notice. And as a facilitator, you can hop around to each of the individual rooms and say, hey, how's everything going in here? Do you need any help? And you can pop in and out along the line. So, all right, Brian says, I think any level of a paid account, not a feature in a free account. Cool, thank you. So yeah, it's super, super neat. Like I said, to kind of break people out, bring them back together. And if you have a large group or you're really crunched for time, I would highly recommend, so you're not debating it during the workshop, that you divvy those people up ahead of time. It's some of the pre-work for your meetings. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat.
You can unmute too, if you'd like. If that's okay, Nate.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Nate, should we put some information down here, like your website? Can I include that there? Maybe your past lunchtime topic too? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, sure. Okay. And yeah, anybody who's on here, feel free to ask me any questions, follow up directly, nate@thenate.com. Let's see, the whiteboard thing looked really neat. Does that integrate right into your meeting? Yeah, so basically it's like all being in the shared Google Doc, except it's a whiteboard application. So I think Miro doesn't require you to sign in or pay for it. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure you can just kind of join in and collaborate. Even, it's, like I said, has a pretty low barrier of entry to get started. So it's definitely free to get started as an individual. So please check out Miro and Mural and click around in there and play with it. The starter templates for the different workshops are really great. So you don't have to feel like you have to start from scratch. And let's see, how do you address that and make them feel at ease? Oh, wait, sorry. What have been some of the biggest resistance statements you've received from participants reluctant to engage? Okay. So I think, again, kind of like if you've ever done this in person, it's just kind of calling on people directly, but you do so in such a way that you don't feel like you're calling them out. Say, hey, I'd love to hear from everybody. Does anybody else have any thoughts? For example, I can say, hey, Albert, thanks so much for the chats. I loved, hey, Clay, have you had any experience with this? And if not, that's fine. Clay doesn't have to answer. But I think, if you kind of do it in a really approachable way, I'm not trying to make Clay feel bad, but I would love to hear from him, for example. And I know Robert at the beginning had some questions, and he probably not feeling bad at all. Thanks, Clay. Robert had some questions up front about, and perhaps I've answered them. But if not, I'd definitely say, hey, Robert, before we started kicking off, you had some stuff you want to talk about. Would you like to bring that up for now? So I think just being really, really calm and cool and collected and just saying, hey, it's really important to hear from people because that's why y'all are in the workshop together, right? Like you're bringing a perspective. And I think that's some of the pre-work you have to do as well is make sure that if you're inviting people or someone's been asked to be invited, that you understand what their background is, understand what their expertise is, and you can kind of ask them, yeah, exactly, the same way, yep. And say, hey, Albert, I know that you've worked for an insurance company for a long period of time. I'd love to understand what your experience is like with insurance. So it's also, if anyone's ever done any sort of design research or kind of discovery work, asking them about what they do or how that might apply to what they're doing. People have a really easy time talking about themselves. And I mean that sincerely. And so that's a good way to kind of break down that barrier of like, I'm not really sure, I'm kind of reluctant. And I think, encouraging people to be on camera is good as well in a workshop setting. This one doesn't matter quite so much. But again, in a workshop setting, you can kind of see their body language if you feel like they're checking out, even unintentionally, right? It's hard to pay attention to this long time. And just kind of refresh and get them re-engaged. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I did have to step away for a minute, so I might have missed this. But my question is regarding, I've seen some workshops where the camera moves and the person's standing up. And I know we talked a lot about tools, but have you worked with any of like tools for cameras or to link them up to like your Zoom or any other kind of platform? And I wonder if there's any benefit to that. Like you know what I'm talking about? You can get like the gimbals for your phone and it'll track your face. I was looking into one of those for our lunchtime topics, but I'm not sure how, when we go back to working from the office maybe and broadcasting them here, if that would be something worthwhile. And just curious what people think about. I've heard that standing up sometimes makes things more engaging or can when you're presenting to people over video. Yeah,
I can tell you that, let's see here. I don't know if I can turn it on. Let's see. I'm not sure what the setting is. But there's a setting in this application where it will track my face. I'm not sure how this works because I haven't used it. I tend to sit down when I'm doing this, but yeah, you're right. There are definitely tools for that. So this one's completely software-based. It's just using the camera on my laptop. But that's another tip, which I didn't really include. But if you're going to be the facilitator a lot, it's kind of hard to get a high-res webcam right now because they're all sold out. But if you're going to be doing a lot of this work, investing in that is important because then you come across clearly. Same from an audio standpoint, getting a really professional mic can be really helpful. If you listen to any podcasting that sounds really great, they have a really great mic setup. So if you're going to do a lot of this, think of this, it's the same kind of thing. It's going to be a lot more engaging. I know that I've worked with some folks who are into gaming. And so when they're at work, they use their gaming headset and it sounds like they're right next to me talking. It sounds amazingly clear. Way much, I have an AirPod in my ear, and I'm sure this doesn't sound nearly as good as what they sound to me when I hear them on my gaming headsets. So super important. Lighting is super important. Yep, exactly. Thanks, Clay. Lighting is important as well. If you're sitting in a dungeon, try to get yourself a light to kind of brighten something up so people can see you. If you're totally backlit that's not that big a deal if you can get a light, but if it's just you in a silhouette, it's hard for people to feel engaged. Then your question though about the gimbal, I've never used one myself, but we did have a meeting room at Gulfstream that had one that would track you, which is pretty cool. And that was built into their in a few of the conference rooms, and it would always move to whoever was talking, which was pretty interesting. And that was helpful when a bunch of people were in a room talking. It would zoom in who was talking. I haven't used one if it's just a person moving around, but I assume it would work in the same way where it would follow them around.
Cool. Any other questions before we officially end at 1 p.m. We're very prompt, but we've got about 12 minutes left, so get it in while you can.
Yeah, Brian, that's a good tip too. Mine's usually about right at face level, but yeah, you don't want, if you like this is better than it was before, and this is not really helpful at all. If you just see my eyes floating. That's every FaceTime with parents and grandparents, right?
That's true.
Or I'm holding the device over my. Sorry, is my hand blocking the camera again? Right, that's like camera use 101, right?
Well, if questions have kind of come to us slow, is it okay? It looks like we can email Nate at nate@thenate.com, and I put his website up here if you look up in the group chat. So you can go check that out. Nate, when I was talking about posting your lunchtime topic you did previously for us, I realized we didn't record it because it was before the pandemic and we were talking about recording it then. So We'll be moving forward. We'll be recording all of them, I think. So, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Nate. And we just want to say thanks for coming on and doing this because I think we're all kind of tired of the same old Zoom workshops and it's getting a little bit redundant. So it's nice to be able to learn ways to spice things up. I know that we're at the Creative Coast, we're always looking for new tactics and fun things to do. So if there's no more questions, then we'll go ahead and close it out. And feel free to reach out to Nate again. And we have another lunchtime topic. It's coming up next week, and we're featuring Victoria Baylor. And I'm going to just read you a quick blurb right here, but my phone's being slow. Victoria is presenting, she's going to be presenting next Thursday, August 27th. And again, it's from noon to 1 p.m. And she's talking about how you are the greatest business in your asset and how to leverage your personal brand to gain your visibility and clients and the revenue you desire. So we're excited to have her come on. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. It's on our website at thecreativecoast.org/events. But yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, and we'll hopefully see you next week.